The Clemson Spring Game is in the books. We're going to break it down. We've got some insights for you with Matt Goldin. Before I bring Matt on, I want to remind you this video is sponsored by the Respian Mans, the first book of the Kingdom of the Infinity Realm series. And if you'd like a free copy, just subscribe to this YouTube channel and go in the comments and just write subscribed. If you're already a subscriber, you could do the same. If you've done this in the previous video, you can enter a second time and I'll count it as a second one. And then just keep a lookout in the YouTube comments, and I will pick someone randomly, and I'll reach out and ask for your email address or your physical address, and I'll send the book out to you. So without further ado, let's bring Matt on, and let's dive right into the Clemson Spring Game. Matt, how's it going?
It's going great. Good to be back and good to be talking football again. It feels like it's been a while since the bowl game.
Well, when you're not playing into January, it is longer, right? And so a lot of anticipation. I feel like every year it's that way, but good to see actual football being played. And I'll start with this. All right, so every year people say don't take too much from the spring game. You're not going to learn much from the spring game. It's all split up, and I disagree. Every year I watch it, there's always something that I should have taken away or that I did take away that ended up being spot on. For one last year, like Khalil Barnes had a huge day. He ended up being a big contributor. That's just one of a bunch of different examples. So let's talk about some of those little nuggets that you might have seen that could turn into something real during the regular season. I'll start you with a guy that I think everyone was anxious to see is wide receiver Bryant Wesco. He had 26 yards on 3 catches, including the game's only touchdown. Any thoughts on the freshman?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely looks like he's going to live up to some of the hype. I mean, he was probably the most hyped, recruit of this last class. I'm very excited to see him. Glad to see that. I noticed, he did have a few of the freshman moments. I know he had at least one drop that was right in his hands. Then that's going to happen. And that's why you hope that we have a good enough, deep enough wide receiver room. We're not having to rely solely on a freshman because they're going to have those moments. I was really happy with him, really happy with what I saw, and I think that he can really do a lot for us.
Yeah, he did have one drop. I noted that. He wasn't dominant, but the catch he made on that, I guess it was a fade route in the end zone, was a great throw by Trent Pearman. We'll talk about him in a bit, but a great catch. And that's the kind of sort of outside wide receiver threat that we've been missing. Now, Tyler Brown was out, but Antonio Williams played. And we know what you get with Antonio Williams when he's healthy, but I sort of forgot just how crucial he is to the offense, how critical he is. He's not that outside guy, but he's a guy who's going to pick up yards after the catch, and that's what he did in this game. It's just a reminder. You saw it, particularly the last drive in the Gator Bowl against Kentucky, and you saw it again in the spring game. I think he's one of the most critical players on this offense. What did you think of his play and his role in this offense?
Yeah, and I go back, during the season when he was out and Tyler Brown was doing so much, you kind of forgot how crucial he really can be to the offense. And he really made a statement in that Gator Bowl, and I think he picked up right where he left off there at the spring game. 5 catches, 62 yards. I was impressed with him. He looks to be as good as he was in 2022. So definitely not too worried about him taking any steps back, missing almost an entire year with injury.
Yeah, and I've been really harsh about this wide receiver group, but for the first time, maybe since 2020 or really since 2019, I'm actually kind of feeling optimistic and maybe excited about, dare I say, a deep wide receiver group. They were just so injured, and maybe they'll struggle with injuries again. We don't know, but they'll get Cole Turner back. He didn't play in the spring game. Antonio Williams finally healthy. He looks great. You're going to replace Bo Collins, and in a way, you're replacing Will Taylor, who he wasn't on scholarship, but he essentially ate one of those slots and then left to focus on baseball, which I think was the right call. But you're replacing them with Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore, big time freshmen. And then, of course, now you got Tyler Brown coming back for sophomore year. So any more optimism, or am I looking at this with orange tinted glasses this time?
No, you're absolutely right. I think we're in a better place in wide receivers than we've been in the past few seasons. I'll also say, I know early on he had some mistakes in the game, but Adam Randall kind of woke up and had a pretty good spring game. I think, again, I don't think he's necessarily ever going to be like the guy. He's not going to necessarily be the T. Higgins, but I think there's no reason he can't be a solid third option and a guy that you you look at. I mean, I think if you look at Clemson's, for years, there's always the wide receivers. There's always been the two big playmakers, but there's always been the Sharon Peaks of the group that are still going to be just as good. They're just not the stars, and I think there's no reason Adam Randall can't be that. It feels like there's a lot of options for whoever the quarterback is to use.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Adam Randall. I forgot him, but he actually led all receivers in receiving yards with 85. He had a long 55-yarder, which was a great throw and catch. I think that one was Cade Klubnik. So good call on mentioning him. He reminds me of Joe Ngata a little bit, not quite as developed yet, but Joe Ngata, who you're not expecting to be your number one wide receiver, like Joe Ngata in the correct role. And if that's what he becomes, that would be great. Let's talk about these linebackers, freshman Sammy Brown and Jamal Anderson. I mean, obviously Jamal Anderson stood out. He had the interception. He had an interception in the last spring game. He actually had two in this game, but they called one back for an offside on Jahiem Lawson, which was very iffy call, I think incorrect. And it was not a play where Vizina was treating it like a free play. I do not think he noticed. I think it was a legit second interception for Jamal Anderson, even though it doesn't count in the record. So really impressed with him. What do you think of Anderson and Sammy Brown?
Yeah, you got to love Jamal Anderson. I mean, anytime you've got, him being that athletic, and then the fact that he can go out and throw up the dirty bird after he runs in like his dad used to do. I love that, being a Falcons fan. But yeah, he was really impressive. I'm glad to see him develop, because I think he's a guy that, can really step in. We've had some great development with linebackers over the years. And Sammy Brown, first play of the game, gets a sack. I know sacks are a little bit different in spring games because it's two-hand touch, but you watch that play, he was exploded off the line, was in the backfield. I mean, it's in a real game, that's probably also going to be a sack. He's probably going to make the tackle there. So I was happy to see that, excited for him. He's the guy that was a big get to get him away from Georgia. He's from 30 minutes outside of Athens, if that. So to be able to go in and get him, that was a huge get. He's really showing that he's going to be a playmaker.
Yeah, and then one, we don't normally talk about kickers here, but I think this is one we got to talk about after all the struggles with Robert Gunn. They brought in Jonathan Whites last year. I'm not a huge fan of bringing in kickers, giving them a scholarship out of high school. Just there's been too many situations where we do it and they don't work out, and now you're saddled with 4 years of scholarship of a guy who can't contribute. And last year that was the case, and they found a walk-on in Whites that really, I don't know if they beat South Carolina or Kentucky without him. But they're doing it. They're bringing in Nolan Hauser from North Carolina. So definitely wanted to see him do really well, right? You can't have two kickers on scholarship and neither of them be good or able to help you really. But Nolan Hauser looked really good. He was 2 for 2 and he made a 48-yarder. Are you as encouraged as I am, or again, am I over my skis on just one game here?
No, very encouraged with that. I mean, Robert Gunn, I think, is going to still be the kickoff guy, and he's got the leg. And he showed the leg too on that 55-yarder he missed. He didn't have the accuracy, but he had plenty of leg on it. But being able to see that Hauser can make them, I'm very encouraged with that. I think that you're going to see him fill into the field goal kicking role that Whites was in, and then go and continue on kickoffs. And I think that's a pretty good setup. So yeah, no, I'm very excited, very encouraged to have a little bit more sure footing with the kicking situation.
Yeah, that's just a big relief. I don't know how much it'll swing the games. You don't know until you're in those situational situations, I guess. But the relief of not having that dread of, if we don't pick this up, you almost have to go for it on fourth down. Just going to make the season a lot more relaxing and enjoyable. One more guy I want to talk about before we get to sort of the elephant in the room, which is quarterback, Jahiem Lawson. And I will admit, I was not thrilled when we took him. And when he didn't really contribute for a while, it seemed like I was right. He looked awesome in this game, and I will be thrilled to take an L on this one. He had 2 tackles, but both were TFLs. One was a sack, and he had a really, really great interception on this wheel route where he stuck with the receiver and turned his hips and just snagged it was a little underthrown by Vizina, but it was still just a tremendous play by him. What did you think of Lawson? Can he contribute?
Yeah, really excited about him. During the game, they interviewed Shaq, and Shaq said that, Jaheim's a different kind of defensive end. He's a little bit smaller than Shaq was. Shaq was good with power rushing. Jaheim's got better moves, and I think that we're going to see that. Jahiem, I really am excited about what he can do because this really shows me that he has the ability. And when you have a guy that can, peel off and cover a running back on a wheel route like that, it really adds another depth to what you can do with your defense. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a really exciting guy. I know we've got a lot of talent on the defensive line, but being able to get Jahiem Lawson, ready and having him ready to go, that's going to be huge for this defense going forward.
Yeah, and I was real concerned about the depth of defensive end and really felt like they should use the portal so they didn't have to move Peter Woods over. But, this makes me feel better about that. And, of course, the defensive tackles really showed out. Stephon Green was good. Trey Williams is finally healthy. Obviously, Peyton Page, DeMonte Capehart. So maybe having great coaches with Chris Rumph over at defensive end now, maybe that plays a big role.
Yeah, it really feels like things are going pretty well and the wheels are turning on that side, on that position.
All right. Well, this video is going to go a little longer because I want to dive into the most important position in football, and that's quarterback. We've saved it for last because, as I was saying, the most important position on the football field is quarterback. So we've saved it for last. Let's talk about 3 different quarterbacks we saw from Clemson. Matt, I'll just let you take it. What were your initial thoughts, and then I'll dive in.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a bad game from Klubnik. I know early on he looked a little rough, but he settled in a lot. I will say that Trent Pearman looked like the best quarterback on the field, and that seems to be the general consensus. And it kind of makes you wonder, going into fall camp, will he kind of push for that starting job now?
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to challenge Klubnik necessarily, but for the second spring game in a row, Chris Vezina really struggled out. I was really bummed. I loved his tape out of high school. You could tell he has a strong arm, and you could tell he's really fast. I mean, he didn't make the big runs because he got slightly touched and they calmed down, but you could tell he's capable. So he's mobile, he's strong. But he had 2 interceptions, both pretty bad, and really the third one to Jamal Anderson that got called back. I'm not saying he's a bust, but he's not ready. And I wonder if Trent Pearman could be that second stringer. And I'll give you the numbers before you respond. Trent Pearman, this is a sum of his stats from both teams, but 141 yards, passing touchdown, 13 for 18, which is great passing. And then another 62 yards net rushing and a rushing TD. He looked pretty mobile too. Your thoughts on the second string?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that he's mobile is huge. I was not expecting that part from him, especially in a spring game because nobody runs, as a quarterback in the spring game. So that was huge for him. I definitely like what I saw with him, and I think that, if nothing else, he's probably going to be quarterback 2 going into the season. Kind of in that Chase Bryce role. And, hopefully you don't get in the situation where you have to bring him in because of injury. But I think definitely a guy that, if you get to that situation, you feel comfortable going in, which I don't think last year we ever felt that. I think, there was a lot of questions when Cade struggled last year of, okay, why don't we try somebody else? Well, see that Vezina's not necessarily ready, and we didn't know. Us as fans didn't really know what we had in Pearman, and I don't know how many fans would have trusted him at that point. So I think seeing him now, it eases a lot of anxiety going in when you've still got a little bit of question marks with Cade.
Yeah, I saw someone satirically saying, let's start the Stetson Bennett of Clemson, right? And I don't know if I'm going to anoint him that, but I think he could give Clemson depth if CV isn't ready. And frankly, after I've sort of taken the view that I'm going to take all the coach speak that we hear in camp with a big grain of salt and trust my eyes. And I've seen CV play in 2 spring games, and he struggled a lot in both of them. So they say he's pushing Cade, but I struggle to believe that. I think Pearman might be the one pushing Cade. Now, back to Cade Klubnik, and we can end on him because I think he's, again, the most important player in terms of if this team's a 9-win fringy playoff team or a playoff team that can actually win a game or 2 in the playoffs. I watched it live in person in Clemson, and I thought he looked terrible. And I went back and I rewatched it, and I didn't want to shoot this video and say how terrible he was without really watching it more intently. So I watched it on TV where I could sit down and focus a little bit more. And I thought it was pretty decent. I mean, it was not a ton of big plays. And he only finished 13 for 26. He had one that he threw into jeopardy that didn't get picked. The pick was really more on the receiver. He had 1 or 2 that were low, but otherwise he was just taking what was available there. Obviously he didn't have Maffa and a bunch of his receivers. I thought he looked decent. I don't know. All right, we do not know if he's taken that step and become, dramatically better than last year, but I didn't see anything that told me he definitely hasn't, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And that's what I took away. There were times that I'm watching, I'm like, okay, he's doing everything right. He's just throwing to a walk-on right now, or he's got, second string, third string left tackle who's not able to handle the pass rush. I mean, it felt like, I don't know. We don't know that he's taking the next step, but I don't think that you can say for 100% sure that he hasn't, because I think he was just taking what he was given in this game, and he was working with a lot of backups. So yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I think there was a lot of good I saw from him, just of decision making and such.
Yeah, and so let's sort of end with big picture. My general thought. Another guy I didn't mention was Ryan Linthicum, who I was trying to keep an eye on. He obviously left with injury, but the few snaps I was able to hone in on him, I thought he looked good. I kept an eye on Sewell and Trent Howard. Thought they looked fine at center. So my overall takeaway was, all the pieces around Klubnik looked as good or better. The defense looks like they could be really, really good. The receivers look deeper. We didn't have Brenningstool, but between Josh Sapp and Brenningstool, I think we'll be fine at tight end. I thought the offensive line should be fine, and everyone returns except for Putnam. And I just talked about the centers. To me, the question is, does Cade take a step? If not, maybe they're marginally better than last year. But if he takes a step, this is a team that should win the ACC and be good enough to, you get that bye. Maybe they could win a game and at least get to the final four. That's sort of my view. But to me, a lot of it still hinges on how good is Cade really going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. There's a lot of talent around Cade, so it's really going to come down to what steps does he take. And I definitely like a lot of what I've seen. Josh Sapp made a great catch out there. I also I like what I see from Olsen Pat Henry. So I think there's a lot of depth at tight end, which we haven't. We've usually had kind of one guy at tight end for a while. Now we've got, two guys that I really like in Sapp and Brenningstool, and then you've got Henry who's coming along. So I think there's a lot for Cade to work with. So if he takes that next step, it could really be a good year for Clemson.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, don't forget, check out the Recipe Man. I'll put all the information in the YouTube description, and be sure to subscribe. And if you'd like a free copy, enter the sweepstakes by just letting folks know or letting me know that you subscribed in the comments. Matt, where can folks find your work?
Yeah, as I always get a Shakin the Southland for a lot of my stuff, especially right now with it being baseball season. Also do TigerNet Podcast with David Hood. You can find on TigerNet and also wherever you get podcasts. And you can find me on Twitter, or X, I guess as they call it now, at MattFG53. So any of those.
All right. Appreciate you joining, Matt.